Hi, my name is Viktoria and I'm a certified Canadian counsellor at Heartfulness Psychotherapy, and I've been invited here at the British Columbia Mood Disorder Association to talk about self-esteem. And I wanted to start off by answering a few questions about self-esteem that are commonly asked to me. So the first question that I wanted to answer is, how do we define self-esteem? What is it? And to prepare for that, I was looking up some definitions online and found that Wikipedia defines self-esteem as our subjective evaluation of our self-worth. And it also entails our own attitudes to ourselves and our judgment of ourselves. So to further break it down, that definition of esteem, we can look at it as a relationship we have with ourselves. Just like with another person, we can have positive relationships where we are supported, we feel like we're understood, and we feel as a result quite secure in them. And we can also have negative relationships, right, where we feel like we're criticized, unaccepted, constant anger. And so in those relationships, we tend to feel quite insecure and anxious, right? So the same applies to our own relationship to ourselves. How we're relating, how we're talking to ourselves, what kind of feelings we have towards ourselves, right? Are we kind and gentle, nurturing and motivating, or we're very critical and we bully ourselves, right? So that's what I would define as self-esteem as. Another question that's commonly asked is, what factors can contribute to developing low self-esteem? And the main kind of components of self-esteem are our experiences, life experiences, our beliefs and expectations. So I want to start off with the first one, our experiences and how they can contribute to development of self-esteem. Our initial experience, especially early life childhood experiences, can have pretty dramatic effect. So if we're growing up and experience pretty dramatic abuse or neglect or bullying, we can really internalize the anger we experience from another person, internalize it, and then treat ourselves with that kind of anger. So if we constantly, for example, criticized by one parent, and one parent is relating with a lot of anger and says we can never do anything right, we might as a result take that on and internalize that message and treat ourselves with that same attitude. So it's sort of become that negative role modeling for us. Another element, the belief. Our belief system has a big influence on self-esteem, what we believe about ourselves. So again, when we're exposed to, some of our beliefs are explicit and some are implicit, so we again absorb them from outside world. And so, for example, if we constantly hear a message, you can't do anything right, we in the end might internalize it as a belief of ourselves. I'm someone who can't do anything right. And that belief, if we hold it true, if we never really examine it and poke holes at it, we might end up kind of going for our life with that belief, and it will hold us back from doing things. It will hold us back from attempting things because it will automatically promote a sense of anxiety for us. Right? And then the third element, which is expectations, what we expect of ourselves, what other people expect of us, as well as just general expectations of the world, can also have dramatic influence. So for example, if we are placing on ourselves expectations that I should always get A's, I should do everything perfect, I should never make mistakes, I should always be happy and never feel anxious. These kind of expectations can really make us feel quite overwhelmed because they're so unrealistic. And what might end up happening is that we always fall short of meeting them, and we constantly feel like we fail. And as a result of feeling like we failed, that can contribute, that feeling, that attitude towards self can contribute to lower self-esteem. So having more realistic expectations, achievable expectations, is so important for having our self-esteem intact and strong. So those are the factors that are very important in self-esteem. Another question that is commonly asked is, what is the interaction between our self-esteem and mood disorders? So I think it's a very valuable question, because what we often what we need to keep in mind is our emotional state has a big impact on our self-esteem, just like I talked, that attitude we have to ourselves, the emotions we experience. And so what happens with mood disorders when people experience anxiety disorder or depression disorder, it's really sort of shadowed by this constant experience of being in one state, usually anxiety, overwhelming feeling of depression. And so there's a constant presence of one emotion that will sort of, at that time, can define us as the only thing we experience, because we don't have those maybe really good days anymore. And as a result, we might kind of get stuck and think of ourselves as only that one emotion, and that it defines us. Another aspect of when we are feeling that way, it really undermines our ability to go and do things, right? We don't have the same energy, we feel anxious or depressed, we can't go and do things. And as a result, we might have expectations on ourselves, like I should go to work, I should do my projects, I should, take care of my kids, and realizing we are not able to meet those expectations and falling short, and as a result, again, feeling more depressed and anxious. So that's how kind of self-esteem can interact with mood disorder. And one of the elements we find also with mood disorder is that people often have pretty rigid expectations and beliefs about themselves that are really hard to kind of shake up. If you look, for example, at how our expectations can change as a result of physical pain. Let's say somebody broke a leg, their expectations about their performance might change. They might expect themselves to take a couple of days off, they might expect that as a result of pain they might not be able to concentrate. So they will give themselves allowances, they'll change and adjust their expectations. What we find is that people don't have the same attitudes towards more emotional sense of pain, that they don't make the same adjustments when they're dealing with anxiety or depression. And as a result, that keeps them in that loop, that very rigid expectations. But there's a large amount of research now that supports that there isn't any differentiation between emotional and physical pain in the sense of how it is affecting our body. As a matter of fact, it shows that we experience pain, whether it's emotional or physical, in the same brain region. The same brain region lights up on MRIs, right? So really that's an important piece with mood disorder interaction with self-esteem. Another element that I wanted to speak with, some people ask me, well, can you give me an example when you worked with somebody with self-esteem and it helped them? So I wanted to speak to one example, and then it kind of combines several stories of clients that I met with, so there's nothing identifiable, it's in this information. But I want to speak to one example where I've met with a young man. He's about in early 20s, and he shared with me that he was feeling quite worthless at times, to the point where he might think of suicide. And so we started exploring what was happening for him, and it turns out that he had these expectations for himself that he expected by the time he reaches this age that he was at, that he would learn a lot more and live on his own versus with his parents. So we started talking some more about how these expectations came to be, and through the conversation we started discovering that he's achieved quite a bit. He was holding a high-paying job and traveled a lot, but he seemed to completely overlook that. So he was very focused on these expectations that he wasn't meeting. And we kind of just inquired about where these expectations come for him. And it turns out, for example, that idea of having to move out came from a belief that by the time you reach your 20s, you should be living on your own. And where that belief came for him, for questioning it, it turned out that his parents, when they were young, in early 20s, they moved out and lived on their own. And that was back in the 70s, right? So I checked in with him about what was different about back in the 70s and now, and it turns out that it was quite a bit different. That was not the expectation even anymore. The economy was so different, and there wasn't, it was considered the norm to stay at home longer. So it turns out that the shoe didn't fit. He applied a belief to himself that wasn't fitting this current reality anymore, right? But it was causing him quite a bit of stress. And so just examining that belief really kind of helped relieve that stress. And then furthermore, we even checked in, is this something what he wanted, to live on his own at this point, or he wanted to maybe do something else? And it turns out that that was the expectation he formed back when he was in high school, the beginning of high school. When he was 16, he wanted or expected at 20-something to be doing X, Y, Z. But as we grow up, our expectations and goals change. And what he was trying to fit in is what a teenager came up with, but he was a young adult and he wanted different things now, right? So it was about adjusting and creating flexibility in his expectations. And so it turned out he really wanted us to go to school at this time, which closely tied in with this idea that he expected himself to learn more, right? And I said to him that it was such an abstract idea, learning more, right? Like, how do you measure that? And he said, yeah, like I feel like I can never meet that standard because there's so much to learn. So we talked about how to make the expectation into a goal that's measurable, achievable, and that he can actually take concrete, realistic steps to do. And as for our conversation, there was a course he could take in university that he really wanted to for the longest time, and now it's turned into something more realistic for him. At the end of our conversation, he found there was a great sense of relief for just examining these beliefs and expectations and finding that some of them didn't apply, some of them no longer relevant, and it's about creating flexibility to come up with something that was fitting for him now where he was in life, versus hanging on to something from the past that was holding him back and making him feel anxious. So with this in mind, I was just I wanted to pause for a second here and just notice that a lot of what I speak with talks about our emotions and how much impact they have on our actions and also our evaluation of self-esteem. Oftentimes, people have difficulty distinction between how they feel and who they are, and they might end up kind of being caught up in this idea: if I feel bad, if I feel anxious, depressed, scared, therefore I'm bad. There's often kind of that fusion that's happening, but yet those things quite distinguished. They're quite separate, because we can feel a certain way, and a feeling is something that can pass. It's not a permanent thing, and so it doesn't define us permanently. And so what we want to treat it as a feeling that informs us about something happening at the moment, but it's not a definition of us. Okay? And so I thought to help people kind of distinguish that, I wanted to share one exercise or activity that they can do at home. It might sound slightly weird, but I encourage you to try it out and see for yourself if it works. So what that involves is, next time you might have a thought that's maybe quite harsh or critical of yourself. For example, I feel stupid, or I can't do anything right. You're finding yourself caught up in that train of thought. Take a step back, capture that thought, and I would encourage you to do this exercise out loud, but if you don't have that option, it's okay if you do it inside of your mind. And so what you want to start off with the first step is saying to yourself, repeating, I am stupid 3 times. I know it sounds weird, but we would say, okay, I'm stupid, I'm stupid, I'm stupid, and then taking a moment after that to notice how that makes you feel, reflecting on that. And then moving on to the second step, which is where we add, I feel stupid, I feel stupid, I feel stupid. So rating I feel, right? That's a feeling. And then again, reflecting, taking a moment, noticing how it's making you feel. And then the third element is adding I think I feel stupid, right? So we're adding an element of thought as well, and repeating that 3 times and noticing how we feel after that. And then once you finish step 3, just kind of noticing the change you experience from step 1 to step 3. And what people often notice, that thought is no longer holding that emotional impact on them. They're kind of able to separate it as part of some belief system that's no longer even applying to them, and zero in that, okay, I'm maybe feeling quite uncomfortable right now or anxious, and I can zero on that versus focusing on what I think about this feeling, right? So it's taking them apart. So yeah, I encourage you to try this at home, and try it several times if you're getting particularly stuck on one thing. So that's probably it for today in terms of what I want to share with self-esteem. It's a really broad topic, and perhaps I'll be back again to talk to you more about self-esteem. Thank you for having me here.